Are you looking for a build that's gonna help you get through those really difficult heists that just seem to one-shot pretty much any character that you made? How about a build that has insanely smooth leveling and an easy transition into endgame? And it works with some basic rares, life, resist, as well as a couple cheap uniques, but it can also be scaled into the sky with tons of cluster jewels, corrupted uniques, and more. This is the Ignite Fireball FLAMEWALL Chieftain, or as I like to call it, the Burning Beeftain. Hey guys, Big Ducks here and welcome back to the channel. Now, the Burning Beeftain is not a new build, it's something that I've played back in Delirium League. I was able to farm simulacrums, high-tier Delirium maps, all kinds of cool stuff with this build. We cleared everything in the game back then, Uber Elder, everything. And since then, the build has actually only been buffed. So Fireball got a bunch of buffs to it a while back, just to its base numbers. We have the inclusion of Flame Wall, which is an additional single target buff, as well as it helps with some things like proximity shields and among other things. And cluster jewels aren't really that expensive anymore. We can get some decent ones nowadays. Now remember guys, if you enjoy my content, make sure to like this video so that more people can see it. And also don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this. And last but not least, if you want to get sneak peeks on the next build that I'm playing, make sure to follow me over on Twitch. It's the best way to get an early sneak peek at what build I'm going to be playing next before the video goes live on YouTube. Now without further ado, let's take a look at a couple of the things that we did and then we'll get into the guide. However, keep in mind, we're very early in the league, so I haven't been able to do a ton of crazy stuff with this build, but I'll still show you what we got. So I'm not really certain what goes on with this unique contract, but I guess we're going to try it. So here we go. Time to potentially waste this this unique contract maybe. Let's see what happens. Okay, so fight through the lockdown.
I cannot do this yet.
Okay. Fighting through the lockdown. Okay. This is cool, actually. So I fight through the lockdown. Instead of actually, like, I just fight through the lockdown and I pick up all the chests as I go through. Man, what a crazy idea. Man, if only all of Heist worked like this, that'd be crazy, right? Crazy, dude. But then it would be a map with chests? Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah, I mean, it's like semi-different, right? Because you have things that you're doing, right? Like you've got like doors that you're opening and oh god, this guy's fucking dangerous. Oh, no, don't lag right now. Don't fucking lag right now, are you kidding me? Don't do this right now. Don't do this right now. Come on, game. You kidding me? Therein lies the problem with the league. That's fucking frustrating as hell, dude. We were good for like an hour or two and things were fine, and then as soon as I get into the unique heist, it's like, well, time for your internet to DC. But yeah, I mean, that's like one of the major problems with Heist in general, is just that, oh, you DC'd? Well, lose all your shit, sorry. I think that the map drops are okay. They just don't feel as good as they did the last couple of leagues. Like once you get into the red maps and you get the completion up, it does feel better. Getting there is significantly harder, right? Like the process of just getting there naturally is way, way harder this league. Last league I barely had to buy any. Yeah, I did it this league without buying any, but I mean, it's definitely harder. Like it's not even a question in my head, it's definitely harder. And I think the reason is that contracts are eating up map drops. That's what it feels like. Because if I balance for how many contracts are dropping, and I think that, oh, well, if those were maps, would that be okay? I think that's what it is. Which the thing about it is, I'll be fine with that if and when we get like heists that actually feel good to play. I'll be fine with that, right? Like totally fine with that, no problems. But at the moment, that is not the case. Keeping somewhat healthy pool of T12s, but above that is a roller coaster. Yeah, and I think it's going to continue to be that. Yeah, this build isn't going to melt like many of those other ones, but it actually is doing pretty decent DPS. It's doing a little bit more than I expected without having the Empower and the chest piece and everything going. So that's pretty good. I do still need to get these gems leveled up. I always struggle with Drox, can't figure out how to stop him from being invulnerable. It's the flags. The flags make him invulnerable. And then during this phase, he just takes like significantly less damage. You have to kill the flags, that's the idea. Will you put Empower in your chest piece? Empower I think is only gonna be better with oh, my inventory's full. Empower is only really going to be better with what's it called? With a corrupted chest piece, I feel. A lot of people have problems with Al-Hezman, and while I don't have a lot of chaos resist, so if he does hit me, I'll probably die very quickly. Al-Hezman is actually a pretty simple fight. The big thing about Al-Hezman when you're fighting him is just that you know how these mechanics work. So the least dangerous part about this fight is Al-Hezman. So when you're in this phase, right? Literally all you gotta do when those snakes are in the middle, you just run in a circle, yeah? Hit him if you're near him and just keep running in a circle. Like just Keep some damage on him. You just run in a circle like this and be perfectly fine. Like Al-Hezman is almost completely worthless. He doesn't do anything. Like, all of his abilities are easy to dodge. And then when it gets to the second phase, you literally just stand in the middle here. Those snakes on the outside that pop up, they only pop up when you stand out here like this, and they're melee. So you just stand in the middle, and you just walk around him in a circle. And he's useless, right? Like, Al-Hezman does nothing, dude. Like, all of his abilities are trash, so if you just do those two things, that fight's a joke, 100%. I mean, this is eye level 82 Al-Hezman. It's absolute joke. No problems. Do you have any suggestions for starting the creation of builds on your own? I've played for about a year now, and I was thinking of starting to dip into some build making. Build making's pretty tough, I'm not gonna lie. Making something that is unique, like, there's a reason why that meme is always popular at the beginning of League Start, like the South Park meme, where it's like, they're trying to make their own build, and it's like, nope, someone's already done that. Nope, someone's already done that. Nope, someone's already done that. It's very, very tough to make your own unique, your build. Someone has probably done it at that point. Yeah, that's the idea, is that there's only so many, like, abilities and builds out there that can actually perform without insane amounts of gear, right? If I was making builds at, like, a budget of, like, 30 Exalt, like, I could probably turn this build into, like, a Tri-Elemental Discharge, fucking Frenzy Charge, Endurance Charge, Power Charge, Stormfire, Full Conversion, Ignite build or some shit, right? Like, I could do Cold to Fire, Stormfire, Opal Ring, plus Pyre, and try to do, like, Discharge, Ignite with all charges or some shit like that. I could do some crazy dumb shit like that, sure, yeah? But it's gonna take a bunch of money, and it's just not gonna be great. Like, I could do a different build that would be a little bit better, or probably, like, under 1 Exalt, right? And that's what I go for. You know what I'm gonna say. You know what I'm about to say. It's time to get serious. I don't know, dude. I just kept trying shit, and eventually I made it here. I just kept throwing fireballs. Here, I'll block it. Don't worry, I got you. Oof, I made Kirik take more damage, dude. I put the flame wall down, and his projectile went through it, so now Kirik is literally on fire. Unlucky, dude. No, this is Awakener 5. We're not on Awakener 8 right now. I haven't finished the Atlas yet. Oriath, I will burn to the ground like that gender reveal party that started all of the fires. Oh, you know what? I'm not gonna be able to see when he does the ground effects. I'm, like, almost guaranteed to die at some point, like that. I'm not gonna be able to see when he does the ground effects. This is gonna be a little spooky. Oh, can't see. Oh yeah, I was standing in it again. It almost happened right there. Turns out, when you put a bunch of flame walls on the ground that make it hard to see, it makes Cirrus. So there's a little bit of a problem that we've got here, right? Is that Cirrus is a red fight, and flame walls are red. So unfortunately, it makes it a little hard to see what's going on. Blue Fire MTX? Do I have Fireball MTX? I don't. Dragon Fireball Effect. I don't think that would help. I would like to be able to see things that are going on, but that doesn't seem to be in the cards for me right now. All right, let's go. Last phase. Dude, I can't see anything because of my flame walls. Like, I can't see shit, dude. All right, so I do wonder. I'm curious. Can I do it? Okay, I took a couple hits from it, actually. I'm gonna try to tank one with Valrighteous Fire and see what happens. Easy clap. Oh, you even took some of that one, too. Valrighteous Fire OP, or not Valrighteous Fire, Vol what's it called? Oh, I'm fucking trolling right now. Alright, I don't think I can tank this, though. Vol Molten Shell, sorry. Alright, boy. Give me my items. Come on, I'm tired of this. Thank you. Damn, look at all those good items. Alright guys, so this is my Fireball Flame Wall Ignite Chieftain. Early bird catches the burn. Don't worry about the name. Someone in chat suggested it to me, and it was just bad enough that I wanted to do it. Now, this is a Fireball build, and also we have the addition of Flame Wall. Now, Flame Wall is an interesting ability compared to what you probably already know as just Fireball Ignite. This Flame Wall that you set down like this actually allows it so that when you shoot a projectile through it, it gains a secondary damage buff. You're going to see here it says modifiers of spell damage apply to this. Secondary debuff lasts 2.7 seconds. You're going to see secondary debuff deals 156,000 damage. It's way more than that, keep that in mind. This is just the tooltip DPS, which isn't as good. But you can see when we shoot a fireball, just looks like a normal fireball. And when we shoot a flame wall fireball, it gets this like little extra bit of sparkle to it. Honestly, I kind of wish that they had done a little bit more to make the effect look cooler, but it is what it is. Now, the other cool thing about Flame Wall is that when you put it down, it actually does a pretty significant amount of damage just itself, and you can actually put this underneath things like proximity shields, and it will burn through that. Now, this build is an interesting one, and it uses some interesting gear. Like, this is kind of, it just almost feels like a hodgepodge of just random items that you wouldn't really think to use on most builds, but they're all working pretty well together. Now, the major thing is that we use the Searing Touch, which is a very cheap staff. This gives us pretty much everything that we need. It gives us fire damage, it gives us fire damage over time multiplier, plus a level of fire gems, and the cast speed is okay. Now, this could be easily upgraded into a fossil crafted staff, but I mean, it is what it is. This is just a solid staff. We scale a bunch of armor through the Formless Inferno and a ton of fire resistance. You'll see we're at 165, which goes up from there, as well as with our flask and such. And we use the Skin of the Loyal. Now, this gives us a bunch of global defenses and a plus level of the Socketed Gems, because Fireball actually scales really well with levels. I want you to know that I have honestly not pushed this character super hard. My items are honestly kind of trash. We did make the inclusion of Malachi's Artifice this time around, which is very interesting. I wasn't too sure about this, but someone in chat convinced me to use it, and it is actually pretty good. Because what happens is that with Malachi's Artifice, we just drop down that Orb of Storms, and as long as it hits an enemy once, that elemental equilibrium stays on them forever, until they swap phases or die or anything else, right? So we're gonna do a map. I'm gonna show you what this build is capable of, show you a little bit about it. This is a tier 16 map. No, it is an unidentified corrupted map. Before this, it had negative max res, like players can't dodge, some monster move speed, life damage, all that kind of stuff. It's a pretty rough map. We're going to be running it with 3 scarabs, just a standard run on this. This is a tier 16 map, and we have a bunch of watchstones with sextants on them, so you're going to get a bunch of extra density. This is on only Awakener 5 because we haven't really been pushing maps too hard. If you haven't been aware, there's been some issues with map sustain, and I try to not buy maps early on in the league, so I'm just now really getting here, even though we've played a decent amount. So let's get into it. Now, as I said before, map drops have been a little bit rough, so if you've been having problems right now towards the beginning of Heist League, you're not alone, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But you'll see here that this build actually clears quite well, even in tier 16s, even on more difficult mobs, we clear pretty solidly. And I spawned with Conqueror. We've got Einhar enemies in here, but you kind of get the idea. Now, the green fire is from the flask, before people ask about it. I've gotten a bajillion questions about that before. It's from Cinder Swallow Urn. It's just whenever you have the flask going, it causes all of your ignites to be green instead of red, so that's what that is. Now, I'll show you here. When you put Flame Wall underneath these little bubbles, it actually just completely ignores them, which is a really nice thing about the build. But this build has a pretty simple playstyle. You run around, you shoot fireballs, they ignite everything, and it chains all around all the different enemies. Now, I do want to show you something kind of interesting. There are a couple tricks about this build, and one of the more interesting ones is with Vol Fireball. Now, this is Vol Fireball. It just shoots fireballs out in a circle around you as you're killing things. When it comes back up, I'll kind of show you how you can use this for things like Legion Stones and other like really large density packs. So something that you can actually do, oh, we have a Legion Stone here, so I'll show you exactly what I mean. Something you can do is you can surround yourself with flame walls, and then you can hit this button, this Vol Fireball, and it will shoot those Vol Fireball empowered ones from the flame wall in all directions. So it helps a little bit with clear. It helps a little bit with just doing some extra damage whenever you've got your flame wall up. You hit that, you hit all of that around you, and you don't have much to worry about. Now, I want to note that this build doesn't do insane single target damage without a little bit of investment. It does take some pretty decent gear to get it doing like, I mean, it's never going to do stuff like my ball ending Archmage. That's just not going to happen. It isn't that kind of build. This is more of a tank build. Because this build has a ton of life regen, a ton of defensives. Like when we get hit by any kind of physical damage, you pretty much just become immortal thanks to our cast when damage taken immortal call and our 6 endurance charges. Now, another thing that we do have is we do have Vol Molten Shell. Now, something interesting is Vol Molten Shell, when we have all of our flasks and everything popped and we're going at like full speed, let me get a little bit more cleared here. So when we have all our flasks popped and we pop Vol Molten Shell, you'll see that's an extra 10.8k life that we can prevent with that Vol Molten Shell, right? So it's actually quite a bit of extra defensives just on a whim if you really, really need it, yeah? So that's pretty much all there is for this build until we get to the boss, because there is a couple things that we got to talk about when it comes to the boss. As I said, it does take a little bit of work to really get this build going properly for bossing, but we'll jump to the boss right now. All right, so we're at the boss. Now I want you to keep in mind, this build is really not focused on doing boss damage, and I want to talk a little bit about how you actually do boss damage in this build. Now, we have Arcanist Brand, and what Arcanist Brand is going to do is that this is going to apply both our Wave of Conviction as well as our Flammability. The Wave of Conviction is going to give us the exposure, like negative 25% to elemental resistances, because it's going to do mainly fire damage, and flammability is also going to cause us to, do more damage because it'll have less fire resistance as well. Now, Arcanist Brand is actually pretty interesting. I've been using this on a lot of my builds until I get like a curse on hit ring, basically, just because it's very easy to just pop these down and have them latch onto the boss and stay there for like a good 10 seconds. Honestly, pretty insane. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be walking up to the boss, we're going to be dropping our Orb of Storms, we're going to be dropping our brands on them, putting down some flame walls, hitting them with fireballs, and then just running around and just waiting for the boss to die. That's the main way that we do this. So we'll drop that down, we'll hit him with that once. That's pretty much all we need to do. You can see he's vulnerable to fire. We never need to worry about that again. You're just going to hit him with some fireballs and you're just going to wait. Now, like I said, this isn't going to do the most boss DPS, but this is still a tier 16 boss. So the idea is here, it still died relatively quickly. The idea is that you don't actually have to just stand there and DPS the boss the entire time. Your ignite is going to last for around 4-ish seconds at any given time, so you don't need to worry about hitting the boss constantly. You only really have to hit him every 4 seconds or so. So you can spend all the rest of your time just dodging, doing whatever you need. So I'll show you here again. Now, in between phases, you are going to have to hit him with this Orb of Storms again. You can see he's now once again vulnerable. But we can kind of take a beating. I'll pop Vol Molten Shell here, and you can kind of see that we can just kind of get hit by him, and we're mostly okay. You just pop down the flame walls, you hit him with the ignite, you just wait a little bit. I'm taking a ton of meteors to the face, and you kind of just chill, and you just wait. See, there we go. I just took like 5 or 6 big hits on a negative max res. It's like 11 negative max res. So keep in mind, I'm taking way more damage than you normally would. And it's pretty simple, honestly. The build is extremely tanky. It doesn't require too much skill to play properly. Like, bossing is very, very simple. You pop your abilities down, you hit them with the fireball, and you run around and dodge stuff. So if you're looking for a build that can actually do bosses without having to interact with the mechanics too much, because you can basically just dodge them at all times, this might be the one for you. So I want to go over some of the main mechanics and how this build works, because honestly, the build is very easy to play, but this section is going to be important for people to understand how to actually scale your damage properly, because it isn't as straightforward as you might think. So there's one major problem with Ignite, is that Ignite is a very confusing mechanic. Honestly, up until recently, I didn't even fully understand it. There's a couple things you need to know about Ignite. Ignite does not scale with spell damage. It does not scale with projectile damage. It does not scale with fire penetration. None of those things actually scale the damage of the Ignite itself. It will scale the damage of the initial hit of the fireball, but it will not scale the damage of the Ignite. And this is important for a couple of reasons. So, for example, any nodes that give you just spell damage, like this one here, any nodes that give you spell damage like these here, are completely useless. Pieces of gear that give spell damage on them, like wands, if you wanted to try to do like a wand and a shield version of this build, are completely useless. You'd be much better off with a scepter. Things that give you fire penetration are completely useless. Now, this gives a little bit of fire damage on top of that, but damage penetrates fire resistance actually does nothing. However, giving things negative resistance does help. I know that's confusing, and it's very confusing to me as well, but penetration of resistance doesn't do anything. Removing resistance from the target actually does cause us to do more damage. Now, what this means as well is that things like GMP, if you're wanting to use GMP, they will actually not reduce the damage of your Ignite. Now you are going to lose the damage of, say, Swift Affliction, but it's not actually going to reduce the damage that your Ignite itself does, which is important. Because until you get this Dying Sun Shaper's Flask, you probably will want to use GMP instead of Swift Affliction, because it's going to make clearing much, much easier. Because as soon as we do have the Shaper Flask, we still do have 3 bolts, and because of the Proliferate, it still does work fine. Other than that, the other important thing about this build is that any kind of Ignite build really has to focus on Cluster Jewels. This is something that I learned back in Delirium League, but you really do need to focus on these Cluster Jewels, because there's just not a lot of good damage on the tree. You can see how strange my tree is, where I'm like, it's stretching all the way across the tree here because there's not really much to get. You grab a couple keystones, like this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and besides that, it's just life, some random fire nodes as they exist, like these ones here, and these ones here. But these right here, and then maybe like these elemental nodes here, and some other very minor nodes. Besides that, there's really not any damage. Besides like this node over here and maybe these block nodes or something, there's not very much damage on the tree. So to be able to actually scale our damage, we're going to require Cluster Jewels. Now, a lot of people are intimidated by Cluster Jewels, and I honestly got really tired of them when they nerfed them post-Delirium League. However, they're starting to come back a little bit now. It's not so hard to get really good Cluster Jewels anymore. You'll notice that I have the Cluster Jewels, and you'll see that pretty much every single medium that I have has this node called Blowback. Now there's a reason for this. So Ignites have a set duration. The immediate duration of Ignite is 4 seconds. Now something that's interesting is that the way that Ignites you inflict deal damage 15% faster works is, as you can see there, they will deal the same total damage over a shorter duration. This is more than a More multiplier. It's very slightly more important than a full More multiplier. The idea here is that you'll see nodes like this one where it says 8% to fire damage over time multiplier. That gives you an 8% multiplier. This is essentially more than a 15% fire damage over time multiplier. It's very, very good. Now, the thing about it is that if you want Blowback with another good node, it's gonna be expensive. Now this is the point where I said earlier where you're going to be able to scale this into the sky if you want to. If you optimize these Cluster Jewels and you really focus on getting like another large one here with 2 good mediums and 2 good small Cluster Jewels, and another one here with 2 good mediums and 2 good small Cluster Jewels, and you drop a lot of like these fire nodes and you drop like these fire nodes maybe, maybe this one is good enough actually. Yeah, that one's pretty good. You may want to keep Holy Fire, but drop some of these life nodes and get some small Cluster Jewels with life in them, or just, you know, optimize your build a little bit further. You will be able to do some pretty ridiculous damage. It's kind of insane. However, you can still do pretty much everything in the entire game with just what I've got here. Just some simple medium clusters. Cremator is really cheap with Blowback. I think I paid like 25C for each of these. 75C in medium Cluster Jewels. This one was like 20, and it's a really, really good one. So that's the majority of the cost of this build. Because this chest piece cost me 10C. This helmet, 1C. This staff is a pretty well-rolled one. It was 5C. The rest of the stuff in here, the only expensive stuff was the flasks. You don't need this, but the price of it is coming down. You don't need a good one of these. I think I paid like 25 or 30C for this when I bought it. These aren't that important. I did most of the content of the game without these flasks. They just allow you to swap out your GMP for your Swift Affliction. And that's pretty much all you need to know. This was 1C. Most of these rares that I got were very cheap. The vast majority of the investment in this build are the Cluster Jewels as well as these flasks. If they're still expensive at this point, I don't even know. Now you'll notice in the path of building that I'll talk about later that there are some pretty good upgrades that you can make if you want to spend more money. If you spend more money, you can get this build up to like 4 or 5 million burning damage pretty easily, and it's probably even more than that. That's pretty good, seeing as that the build is a tank build, essentially. So some other interesting things about this build that you don't see in some other builds is that we're using blood magic. This allows us to get Mortal Conviction. This allows us to have 1 free permanent aura. It also makes us basically not have any mana problems whatsoever. So with the 1 free aura, we go with Malevolence because anger messes up our equilibrium, our elemental equilibrium with our ring. We also grab Unwavering Stance so that we can't be stunned. We grab Call to Arms so that our Enduring Cry is instant at all times. And then we also do grab Glancing Blows just to give us a little bit more chance to block and chance to spell block. And then beyond that, we grab Elemental Overload, as I said before. This allows us to, with that amulet that we get early game, allows us to get a little bit extra damage, and just because there's no reason not to get this because we're not going to be critting anyway, so it's a pretty good thing to have. That's pretty much it for that. I do want to talk a little bit about the leveling. Now, the leveling for this build is kind of interesting. So you want to grab the typical leveling uniques, which are things like Tabula Rasa and Gold Rim. However, while you are leveling, I do suggest that you get 2 of these Pyre Rings. Now, I was using 2 Pyre Rings, I was using a Karui Ward, I was just using standard leveling items and such, but these Pyre Rings, along with this Replica Bloodthorn, this is a new item that gives you 100% increased fire damage. You could use this, or you could use those wands that give you Ignite multiplier. I was legitimately, like, massacring leveling. It was kind of insane how much I was doing. This Replica Bloodthorn, when I got it, I actually got it from a Grand Heist, but I think it's like 1, maybe 2C at most. Yeah, it's 1C right now. Pyres are super cheap. They're 1C. They're very good leveling items. I was using Ungol's Harmony to be able to proc Elemental Overload very easily, or Elemental Overload, yeah, very easily. And between that and all the other stuff, I was absolutely mowing down leveling. Like there were no problems all the way through. I used like Vitality and Clarity and just ran it down the entire time, no issues. Very, very strong leveling build. I do want to say that I haven't tested this build as like a pure League starter yet. I know a lot of my recent content has been like League start related content, and a lot of those things will still work for this build, but it really isn't going to have as much in it. I would suggest that you get a little bit of Chaos first before playing this build. You still can purchase like wands and such to get Ignite damage, or rather fire damage over time multiplier. Like you could buy like a carved one here and you could probably roll it pretty well. I do this pretty much every video, but I kind of show that if you just sit here and roll it, you'll eventually run into some pretty decent mods. Probably I won't get any here because, you know, this is the one time. Okay, so +1 level of all cold skill gems. It's rather easy to roll some pretty decent ones here. You can roll like plus a level of fire gems. You can do like fire damage over time multiplier. You can also get that on staves, but honestly, Replica Bloodthorn, it's a chaos. Just go for it. I tend to not recommend this as a very first build, but maybe closer to the start of next league, I might do some league start testing on it. So that's pretty much it for the leveling. You don't need to know very much. It's a very, very smooth leveling process with those items. I detail it fully in the path of building. And speaking of the path of building, let's get into that over there. I want to remind you that I have been going very, very in-depth with the path of building. I have gotten even more in there, so we're going to talk about that. Make sure that if you have questions and they're not answered in the path of building or anywhere else, that you join the Discord. The link is down below in the description of the video. Make sure that you head over there. Let's jump into the path of building. All right, so now that we're over here in the path of building, I just want to go over a couple of things. Now, if you've used any of my builds before, you know how in-depth these path of buildings can get. I just want you to know that down here in the bottom, there are full leveling trees. These will give you all of the different like level up skills that I suggest that you use. It'll tell you which of the ascendancies you're supposed to go first. Like if you go here to the first one, it's going to show you Ramako Sun's Light. Jump to the next one. I click the third one, jump to the next one, it's going to tell you to go get Velako, and then so on and so forth, all the way up to level 100. It's going to give you all of the nodes that I think that you should get first. I do suggest that you grab these cluster jewels early on if you have the money. They are excellent for damage. You can use these as soon as you want to. You could legitimately very early on come out through here, grab this life, and then just immediately start going into cluster jewels. You could absolutely do that. You could put the large and the 2 mediums here and just spam out cluster jewels, right? That'd be way more damage than what you could get possibly just through the tree. I didn't do that, and I still had no problems whatsoever. You can see in the early part of the tree, I just come out through here, snake up and try to go over towards Holy Fire. And then as I continue, I come and grab Elemental Overload, fill in a bunch of life, go past that, I fill in some more life, I come down here, I grab Blood Magic, and that's pretty much all that you need to know about that. Now, one interesting thing about Blood Magic, I didn't really talk about this in the video too much, but Blood Magic does allow us to get 1 free aura. It allows us to have Malevolence. It's the only aura that's worth the while. I talk about it in the notes. Not much that you need to worry about there. It's just the best aura that we can get. Anger isn't as good. This just makes it so that you don't have to worry about casting anything. You can just cast it perfectly fine, no problems. You don't have to worry about mana. This works really well for this build, in my opinion. There are full skill setups here. So this is the leveling section here. It'll show you all of these. They're in order of importance when it comes to links for leveling. If you're just grabbing a tabula and leveling with that. Secondary abilities, utility abilities, and alternate aura setup. Some little instructions here for what you're supposed to do, and then the end game setup as well on skills. I've got the main version, I've got the Awakened Gems version, I've got all the additional abilities here. On top of that, I have 3 item sets for this build. I've got my items that I completed pretty much everything in the game with. I've got the suggested items that are going to cause you to do a lot more damage. Let me actually change this back to 100. And then I have expensive goal items that will increase your DPS by a lot more, but these are going to be rather expensive. You don't need these. These are just for people who are wanting to see the kind of gear that you can get with a bunch of money. Another thing about the items real quick. I have actually added in some little bits of text at the bottom of the items. You'll see they explain what the item is and why I use it. You'll see on the bottom of these items, it just gives you some more information. So if you have questions about what the items are and why you should be using them, it's all in the actual items themselves. I talk about it, I explain it in pretty much everything here. So look at the item, look at the little stats and everything that I give about it. As I said, the configuration is good, but these notes have got answers to pretty much any question that you can come up with. I mean, I've got information about alternate quality gems. I've got frequently asked questions. There's a ton of answers in those frequently asked questions. I talk about the actual damage of the build. I do extensive information on leveling this build, things that you should grab to level up the build, abilities that you can use, actually leveling the build, what ascendancies. I talk about how to play the build. I talk about which cluster jewels and which nodes are good for the cluster jewels, as well as just some thoughts down here at the bottom. I have really done my due diligence when it comes to this path of building now, so you should be able to get everything you need in here. Everything should be readily available for you to use. So if you do have further questions beyond what's in the path of building, beyond what's everywhere else, you can go down to the description and join my Discord. It's free. It's just like Skype, if you remember what that is. It's a free, just online chat. All of my community is there. I'm there. You can talk with me and anybody else. There's a questions channel in the Path of Exile section where you can ask questions about my build, other builds, whatever you want, and you can just come hang out with me and the boys. So if you've got further questions, join the Discord. It's the best place that you can get help. So yeah, the Burning Beefton. This is a build back from Delirium League, and honestly, it's still pretty strong, even with very little currency early on in the league, with all of the problems that we've had with Heist and everything else. It's worked pretty well. It's a build that I really enjoy. This is one of my favorites of all time, and I hope that you try it, and I hope that you enjoy it as well. Now remember guys, if you do enjoy my content, make sure to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this, and stay safe out there in Ray Class, and I'll see you guys in the next video.